Not all of those people need to be there all the time, but many of them need to be there at least parts of the time. Okay, so now we've got the team together. We have an understanding of why the student needs to be involved. We know something about what the process requires. Now what? We want to start with the career employment piece of the transition plan, and let's look at some questions that we can ask as a team that will give us some direction in terms of this planning. So first of all, we want to look at how we can use our students' interests in planning for after school. What kinds of things does he like to do? How does he like to spend his time? Is he great outside? Does he raise his own farm animals? Is that part of why he wants to become a veterinarian? And if so, is there some kind of agri class or classes that he might be interested in taking at school? Some way to build upon the interest that he has. If he loves computer games, then let's look at some of the computer classes that might be available. What choices would she have for classes that allow her to use strengths and acquire new skills? So we want to both use the students' strengths, so we want them to have successes, and we want to put them in areas that will allow them to kind of develop their strong areas. But we also want them to acquire new skills. So say you have a student who's interested in computers and is not fearful of the computer, so you want them to take some computer classes. But computers are sometimes isolating, and there's something you can do on your own. It's also important for our students to have social activities and know how to get along socially. So maybe it would be good for the student to sign up for some kind of communication class, maybe even a drama class, something like that, but something that gets them out and involved and working with other students, maybe in a hands-on way. It's just a good discussion to have, to look at what are the classes or activities that we can get her involved in that both use her strengths and allow her to acquire new skills. And then what kind of training or job skills will this student need to actually do what he's saying he wants to do after graduation? So if there are particular skills involved, let's look at the classes that are available at school and the extracurricular activities and what's going on on the school campus that will give him an opportunity to acquire some of those skills and training. And then what kind of other experiences are available? So, for example, does the student know how to drive? Does she want to learn how to drive? And if so, then how can we build that into the transition plan? If driving is not an option, or it's not an option at this time, then what other kinds of transportation is available in our area, and how can we help this student learn to use those other kinds of transportation, for example? Also, students need to know things like how to fill out an application, and they need to have some comfort level in terms of interviewing for a job. So they could practice this, they could build this into the transition plan, but you might want to have them fill out an actual job application. So maybe going out in the community and actually asking for a job application would be an important piece of a transition plan. Maybe being able to list some volunteer activities, whether that was at church or through school or just locally for a community nonprofit. But finding opportunities for the student to have those kinds of experiences, because those are good resume builders, and all students are working on those, and our students should be as well. And then maybe there's some jobs around school, or there are chores or tasks that need to be performed at school that also give the student some kinds of skills that then parlay into experience once they graduate from school and need to apply for a job. So that's all important to take into consideration. Next, we need to look at post-secondary education and training. So based on the goals that the student has for himself, what kinds of things will we need to be paying attention to in high school to help that student reach those goals. So if for example, he wants to go to community college upon graduation, well, we need to know what the community college expects students to have done in high school in order to get into the community college. Will they need to have taken the ACT? Do they have to have so many credits in math or English? All of those things are important to check out. And also the cost, and is there any kind of financial support for students applying there? Those are all things that can be written into the transition plan. I mean, it may be written into the transition plan that the student himself will research all of this and will write something up so that it becomes clear that the student does know what he's going to have to do in order to get into the community college or the four-year university or whatever particular kind of further training or education he's decided that he will need. And you want to know what kind of supports are going to be available. Once the student leaves high school, if he or she is going to continue on in terms of education or training, the institution that they've chosen for after graduation, what kind of supports would be available to him there? And how would he go about accessing that support? Some schools are better at supporting students with disabilities than other schools are. And this would be an important line of exploration for the students and could be built into the transition planning process. Okay, that's enough on the education training piece. Now let's look at independent living and community participation. So perhaps your child is going to need a lot more support. And that piece of what happens after graduation is important to have a discussion about, and it's important to look at resources and supports while you're in high school so that those things will be available once graduation has happened. So you'll be talking about where will the student be living once he or she graduates, and then where will the student or the young adult be spending her time once she graduates. Will she have a job? Will she have a part-time job? Will she maybe volunteer? Where will she go for fun? What kinds of activities would she want to be involved in? What about health care? Where is her doctor? And how will she get to the doctor? How will she get to church? Where will she shop? All of those things can be kind of mapped out and put into a plan and talked about. Transportation. How will you get to all of those places? That's a big piece. And in our area, that's a difficult piece for many young people with disabilities. But it's something to talk about, and it's something to build into that transition plan. And then, as we said before, what will they need to know? Do they need to know about budgets? Do they need to know how to shop? Do they need to know about managing money or managing time? Do they need to know what it means to pay rent? How to access the utilities? A huge variety of kinds of activities and information that can be built into that transition plan that helps prepare this young person for life on his own or her own. And then also guardianship. Will the parents need to assume formal guardianship, or what other options are there besides guardianship? If that young person is going to need some additional support, depending on how much and what kind of support, then guardianship may be appropriate, but there are alternatives to guardianship that may be just as appropriate depending upon the needs of that young person. And also information about how to protect the young person's benefits. So what do you do about SSI if that's what your child uses to live? What do you need to know about SSI to make sure that those benefits are protected? Okay, so we've had all of these discussions. So what does that have to do with the IEP? And here are just some suggestions that, in my experience, have been very helpful for parents and students as they go through this process. Start with a transition plan. Don't let the school sit you down and start going over the whole IEP and writing the goals if you haven't even looked at the transition piece of this, particularly once the student becomes 16. But in my opinion, even earlier, at least for some students. So you sit down and you talk about all the things that we've just gone through in terms of the transition plan and get some idea in mind of what this next school year needs to look like and what kinds of things need to happen before you start writing IEP goals. Looking at the skills, setting the goals, talking about the classes that are available, all of that can be built into the goals on the IEP. So you have all of those conversations. You talk about what choices are available during and after school, what other kinds of support and services the student might need, and all of the specific individuals and groups that need to be involved in implementing the goals and making sure that those people are part of the discussion. And then you're ready to actually write the IEP. So the IEP flows from the transition planning process, not the other way around. Okay, if you have questions, please, if this is live, if you're experiencing this live, then send your questions via the box at the bottom of your screen. If you're doing this on your own and you have questions, then email us at supports.org or at cprc@supports.org. That's cprc@supports.org. And one of us will look at your questions and respond via email. Thank you very much.